Okay, so you've got a sharp eye for opportunity, haven't you? Spotting those price differences on pickup trucks, UK versus South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the ones going for, well, a song over here. That classic buy low, sell high idea. It's smart thinking.
It really is. It's, a natural instinct, isn't it? Seeing those potential arbitrage plays in the market.
Definitely. So for this deep dive, we've got this feasibility analysis report. We're going to really get under the hood of this whole idea exporting used pickups, UK to SA.
Right.
Our mission today. To pull out the crucial info for you, the regulations, the costs, the market realities over there, and see if this business model could actually, fly.
And look, the headline finding from the report right off the bat
Yeah.
is that the core plan, buying used pickups here to resell commercially in South Africa, it hits a pretty fundamental legal wall. Yeah, we'll definitely unpack why that is, but honestly, that's the key insight. It shapes everything else. Yeah. Our sources cover the UK export side, the SA import rules, which, like I said, have some serious barriers, the financials, the actual logistics of shipping, and, the SA market itself.
Got it. Okay, let's start here then. In the UK, post-Brexit, it sounds like shipping anything overseas, cars included, now involves a fair bit of red tape.
That's certainly the picture the report paints, yeah. We call it a rigorous framework. Requires comprehensive documentation.
Like what specifically?
Well, you're looking at things like a certificate of conformity that confirms standards, then the bill of lading, that's your shipping receipt, proof you own the truck, obviously, an ERI number, that's your sort of trading ID for outside the UK.
Okay.
Then the V5C, the logbook, needs an export section filled out, and you've got to tell the DVLA it's leaving the country for good.
That sounds like a checklist you really don't want to mess up. What happens if you miss something?
The report's pretty blunt. You can face costly customs delays. Your shipment might just be outright refused, and potentially even, legal ramifications. It's not really a place to cut corners.
Right. Okay, now finance-wise, here in the UK, VAT. Goods exported outside the EU can be zero rated. That sounds helpful for keeping initial costs down.
It does. It offers that upfront saving. But there's a catch. There's a strict 3-month time frame.
3 months!
Yeah, from the sale date to actually get the vehicle exported. And you need solid proof, robust proof of export is the term they use for HMRC. If you miss that deadline or can't prove it left, you could get hit with backdated tax charges and potentially significant financial penalties.
Okay, so that ties into potential delays down the line in South Africa too, maybe.
Exactly. You need that process to be smooth at both ends to meet the UK deadline.
Okay, now let's get to those discounted vehicles you spotted. This links into all the talk about ULEZ, LEZ, CAZ, these clean air zones in UK cities.
Precisely. These ultra-low emission zones, low emission zones, clean air zones, they slap daily charges on vehicles that don't meet certain emission standards.
Which often means older vehicles, right? Especially diesels.
Exactly. Often pre-September 2015 diesels.
Mm-hmm.
The report mentions things like old Land Rover series, maybe Ford P100 pickups, older Mitsubishi L200s, Toyota Land Cruisers from that sort of era.
And those daily charges aren't trivial, are they?
No, not at all. London's ULEZ is, what, £12.50 a day?
Oh, yeah.
But the bigger LEZ and the clean air zones elsewhere, for heavier vehicles, potentially including some pickups, it could be £100, even up to £300 a day.
Wow.
And the penalties for not paying, they start around £180, but can go up to £1,000.
Okay, so these zones are definitely making certain vehicles less attractive, maybe cheaper in UK cities, which is the opportunity you saw those discounted cars, which were not always allowed in UK. But here's the kicker. Does a bargain in Birmingham automatically mean profit in Bloemfontein?
And that's the absolute nub of the issue. This is where we have to circle back to that headline finding I mentioned earlier.
Right.
While these UK zones create a supply of possibly cheaper trucks, South Africa's import rules, they're driven by totally different things, mainly protecting their own local car manufacturing industry, plus safety environment.
So a disconnect.
A potential major misalignment, yeah, between the reason for the UK discount and the hurdles you face trying to import into South Africa. Table 2.1 in the report kind of lays out the UK compliance stuff.
Right. So we can't just assume a cheap UK truck gets a green light over there. Let's dive into those South African import regulations. This sounds like where the main roadblocks are for your plan.
You're spot on. The report really hammers this home. South Africa has a highly restrictive policy on used vehicle import.
Highly restricted.
Yeah, it's not just a bit awkward. It's fundamental. It's about protecting local jobs, local industry. The report quotes that permits are only issued under specifically defined circumstances, And here's the really critical bit. Import permits are not issued for the importation of used or secondhand motor vehicles for commercial resale.
Hold on. That sounds pretty final. So the whole idea, buying used pickups here, selling them there.
It's a major legal barrier right at the outset. That's the core finding.
But it did say specifically defined circumstances. Are there any ways a used vehicle can get in, even if not for resale?
There are a few very narrow exceptions, but none really fit a commercial model. For instance, South African nationals returning home for good after living abroad.
Okay.
They can bring one vehicle they've owned for at least a year, but they can't sell it for 2 years after import.
2 years. Okay. Not a business model then.
Nope. Same deal for immigrants getting permanent residency. Owned it a year. Fine. But again, that 2-year no-sale rule applies.
Right. Any other possibilities? Loopholes?
Well, there's a category for classic or vintage passenger cars, over 25 years old. Sometimes they get exemptions.
Okay, but passenger cars and vintage.
Exactly. And then super specific stuff like racing cars, specially designed vehicles, maybe inherited vehicles. But the absolute key takeaway is none of these exceptions allow importing used vehicles for general commercial resale.
The report really stresses that, doesn't it? I think you said it, quotes, import permits are not issued for commercial resale, and you can't import used cars for commercial purposes.
Precisely. It couldn't be much clearer. It even spells out that imports for resale or business purposes and not for your personal use just aren't granted for used vehicles. This isn't just about navigating taxes or paperwork. It's a flat-out legal no.
And trying to get around that.
Serious consequences. Seizure of the vehicles, big fines, possibly even criminal charges. It's just not worth the risk.
Okay. So even for those rare cases where someone could legally import personally, what's the paperwork like on the SA side? Still complex.
Oh yeah, it's still a major undertaking. You need a letter of authority, an LOA. That's from their standards body, the NRCS. It confirms safety and environmental compliance.
Right.
Then you need the actual import permit, Form IE-462, from their trade commission, ITAC. Plus all the supporting stuff. Passport, proof you own the vehicle, that UK V5C. Again, maybe proof you lived abroad, proof of residency.
Sounds like a lot to gather.
It is. The report says processing after submission is maybe 5 days, but getting everything right before submission is the challenge. They strongly recommend using experienced customs brokers.
Makes sense. And what about the trucks themselves? Any technical must-haves?
Yes, absolutely critical. Right-hand drive only.
Okay, UK vehicles fit that.
Thankfully, yes. They also need to pass South Africa's roadworthiness test. Think MOT and meet emission standards, at least Euro 2 equivalent.
Euro 2, some older UK diesels might scrape that.
They might, yeah. But the roadworthiness test itself is another potential cost, maybe needing repairs. And fuel quality is another factor. SA diesel is better now, maybe Euro fee level, but older imports might not be designed for that. Table 3.1 in the report summarizes who can actually import used vehicles.
So the regulatory picture in South Africa, it really does look like a major barrier, maybe even a dead end, for the commercial used pickup idea.
It certainly seems that way based on this analysis.
Okay, let's pivot to the money side then. Let's imagine, just for argument's sake, it was allowed. What kind of costs are we talking about?
Right. Well, starting in the UK, the actual government export fees are pretty low. But the report flags the cost of professional services using customs brokers. You're probably looking at £100, maybe £200 per shipment.
And given the complexity, that sounds like a must-have cost, not an optional extra.
Pretty much, yeah. A necessary overhead.
Okay, then the vehicle lands in South Africa. What hits the wallet there?
Right. This is where it really starts to ramp up. Import duties, first off. For passenger cars, SUVs, it's 25% of the CIF value. That's cost, insurance, and freight, the total landed value.
25%. Wow. What about pickups specifically?
Well, they might fall under medium or heavy commercial vehicles, depending on classification.
Yeah.
If so, that's 20% ad valorem, 20% of the value. Used cars over 20 years old, also 20%.
So it varies.
It does. The report mentions an average duty of maybe 5.8%, but for cars, light vehicles, minibuses, it can apparently go up to 34%.
34?
Yeah. And if there are trade deals, like with the EU, rates might be lower, maybe 18% for light vehicles, 12% for commercial.
Yeah.
The absolute key, though, is you need the exact SARS tariff code for the specific model to know the real rate.
Okay, so duties, then VAT on top of that, I assume.
Correct. Standard SA VAT is 15%. But, and this is important, it's calculated on the added tax value.
Which isn't just the vehicle price.
No. It's the customs value plus 10% generally, plus the import duty you've just paid.
Ah, so you're paying tax on the tax.
Effectively, yes. It has a significant compounding effect on the total cost.
Ouch. The report also mentioned an ad valorem tax, a luxury tax. That sounds unlikely for a used pickup.
You'd think so. But the threshold for this tax, our $250,000 retail price, has been updated in about 30 years.
Seriously?
Yeah. So with inflation, loads of standard pickups now actually fall above that threshold. It's not just for Porsches anymore.
So it's become a much broader tax.
Exactly. The rate is calculated on a formula, maxes out at 30%, but even a lower rate is another substantial hit.
Okay, duties, VAT, ad valorem. Surely that's it for taxes.
Afraid not. There's also an environmental levy based on CO2 emissions.
Ah, right. How does that work?
There's a charge per gram of CO2 over a certain limit. For passenger cars, it's one rate above 95 grams per kilometer. For double cab pickups, which many of yours likely would be, it's a higher rate, R176 per gram, above a higher threshold of 175 grams per kilometer.
And this is crucial for the discounted UK vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Because they're older or diesels.
Precisely. They're almost certainly going to have much higher CO2 emissions than newer models, so they could get slammed with a disproportionately large environmental levy in South Africa.
Potentially wiping out any saving from buying it cheap in the UK.
It's a very real possibility, yeah.
Wow. Oh, okay, just navigating the finances sounds incredibly complex, and that's before you even think about actually, getting the truck from A to B.
Exactly right. And there are more costs there, too. Port charges leaving the UK, arriving in SA customs clearance, handling fees in South Africa, maybe R7 500 or so, the roadworthiness test fee, plus maybe retest fees,
Right.
vehicle registration fees, potential costs for repairs or modifications to meet SA standards, broker fees again on the SA side if you use one.
It just keeps adding up.
It does. The report talks about the cumulative effect. Table 4.1 gives an example of 2010 diesel pickup. The landed cost in SA ends up being around 58% higher than the UK purchase price.
58%.
Yeah. And as we just said, that example might even underestimate the CO2 tax hit for an older diesel.
Okay, let's talk logistics then. Physically moving the vehicles, what are the options, costs?
Two main ways: roll on, roll off, ro-ro. Usually cheaper for single vehicles. You literally drive them onto the ship.
Oh, yeah?
Or container shipping. You can fit one, maybe two pickups in a standard container. More secure, generally.
Which is better for these potentially older, discounted trucks?
The report actually leans towards containers, interestingly, even if it costs a bit more up front. Better protection against damage during that long sea journey.
Makes sense. What about the actual shipping cost, port to port?
For a pickup, UK to, say, Durban or Cape Town via ro-ro, looking at around 650 pounds. A regular car is a bit less.
And that's just the sea part, not getting it to the UK port.
Correct. That's extra. And the report notes, shipping to SA seems relatively pricey compared to some other African routes.
How long does the whole journey take? Ship sailing, plus everything else?
The sea voyage itself is roughly 23 days. Sailings are maybe twice a month from ports like Sheerness or Southampton. But then you have to add time for all the UK export paperwork before it sails and the SA import clearance after it arrives. The total lead time. Easily 6 to 8 weeks, maybe longer.
That's a long time to have your capital tied up.
Absolutely. Big impact on cash flow.
And insurance for that journey. Non-negotiable, surely.
Oh, definitely. Highly recommended. Costs maybe 1.5% to nearly 3% of the vehicle's value, depending on cover level. Full cover might be around 1.75%, but often with a deductible, maybe £500, £1,000, could be more.
Right.
The report basically says, for a business venture, insurance is not optional. Too much risk otherwise.
Any specific advice on the route itself?
Direct routes to major SA ports are best. Durban gets a specific mention.
Why Durban?
It's strategic. Not just a big SA port, but a hub for re-exporting goods to neighboring countries in southern Africa. So, if the direct SA import route is blocked for commercial used vehicles, maybe Durban offers future possibilities for other markets nearby. Table 5.1 summarizes the shipping details.
Okay, interesting point. So, we've covered regulations, costs, logistics. What about the actual market on the ground in South Africa? Is there good demand for used pickups?
Oh yeah, the report says the used truck market across Africa is huge. Billions of dollars, strong growth predicted, driven by infrastructure needs, need for affordable transport.
And South Africa's role?
It's dominant, mature sector, high demand. Their freight and logistics industries are growing fast, manufacturing too, including automotive. So yes, demand is strong.
Which models are the most popular? Do they hold their value well?
Definitely. The Toyota Hilux is kind of the legend, isn't it? Known for toughness, off-road ability. Report says it holds maybe 70% of its value after 3 years.
70%, that's high.
It is. Ford Ranger is also massive, top seller new, holds maybe 60% value. Isuzu D-Max, also very strong presence, good value retention.
Okay, but here's the potential mismatch again, isn't it? The discounted UK trucks, we're talking about older diesels, maybe less common specs here now, are they the Hiluxes and Rangers that South Africans are clamoring for?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the report suggests maybe not. These older UK models might not quite hit the sweet spot of SA demand.
Sure.
Or they could be in that awkward age bracket, too new for classic status, but maybe not the spec or generation buyers really want.
So the UK discount doesn't automatically mean SA desirability.
Exactly. Table 6.1 compares some UK prices and SA resale values. It highlights that potential gap.
Right. So let's try and synthesize this. Profitability scenarios. Given the big legal block on commercial imports, did the report look at any sort of edge cases?
It touched on a couple. One was the personal import route returning resident, immigrant. You might get tax breaks on one vehicle.
But the 2-year selling ban
makes it fundamentally incompatible with a commercial resale business. Capital tied up, depreciation, market risk over 2 years.
Yeah.
It just doesn't stack up as a business.
Okay. What about the classic vehicle angle? Anything there?
Potentially, but it's very niche. You'd need to find UK pickups over 25 years old, in good shape, that are genuinely desirable to collectors in SA.
Which probably isn't the typical ULEZ discounted truck.
Almost certainly not. This would be specialized sourcing, focused on rarity and condition, definitely not volume.
So, pulling it all together, the final verdict on the original plan. Commercially importing those readily available, discounted, used pickups from the UK for resale in SA.
Based on this report, profitability looks effectively zero or negative. And that's primarily because of the explicit and fundamental legal prohibition. It's not just hard, it's legally locked.
A regulatory barrier, not just an economic one?
Precisely.
Okay, that's pretty clear. So just to recap the main challenges and risks someone faces here, even with niche ideas.
Number one, absolutely, is that prohibition on commercial used imports. Trying to skirt that is the biggest risk.
Right.
Then you still got all the compliance stuff, emissions, paperwork, roadworthiness in both countries. Currency risk, the rand versus the pound fluctuates, and the logistical risks, delays, damage in transit.
And mitigation. Assuming you found some tiny legal niche.
Well, for the main ban, mitigation means pivoting the business model completely or looking at different countries.
Okay.
For compliance, due diligence is key. Using expert brokers, maybe legal advice, currency risk, hedging strategies perhaps, logistics, reputable shippers, maybe container shipping like we discussed, definitely comprehensive insurance, understanding that deductible and good photo evidence before shipping.
Got it. So the final recommendations boil down to?
Primary recommendation.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that the original plan, as you conceived it, isn't currently viable legally in South Africa. Full stop.
Right, accept that reality.
Then, if you want to explore further, consider the alternatives. The classic vehicle niche requires different sourcing, maybe acting as a broker for legal personal imports, a service model, looking into importing just parts or components, different rules might apply, or researching neighboring countries, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, etc. Their rules might be different.
And getting help.
Absolutely crucial. Customs brokers, international trade advisors, maybe legal counsel specializing in this area. Don't try to navigate this alone.
Okay, so the big takeaway for you, thinking about those tempting UK pickup deals, is that the South African regulations basically put up a do not enter sign for straightforward commercial resale right now.
That's the long and short of it, yes.
Yeah.
The direct commercial import plan is legally blocked currently.
But as we discussed, maybe there are those other more complex, more niche avenues, classics, brokering, parts, other countries.
Potentially, yes. They require a very different approach, though.
It makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? Given the clear demand for pickups in South Africa and these really tight import rules, what kind of innovative solutions could emerge? Could we see, I don't know, more focused on value-added services around vehicle ownership there? Or maybe even light assembly using imported components, thinking beyond just shipping whole-use trucks?
That's a really interesting thought. It forces you to think creatively about meeting that market need within the existing or maybe future constraints. How else could that demand be satisfied if direct used imports are off the table?
Definitely food for thought. If this deep dive has sparked more questions or ideas for you, please do show them. Clearly, this is a complex area with lots to potentially unpack further.